what performance can reveal about grammatical structure. So I'm getting messages here, but no, it's okay.
I'm doing that.
Let me start then. So basically the question for today, or the questions for today, is the first one is which paralinguistic and prosodic phenomena may have a role to play in descriptive analysis? And there is also a practical perspective, which prosodic and paralinguistic phenomena should be included in transcripts. Yeah, so coming back to the issue of transcripts from the last two sessions, very brief. I will start with the second question. I will have a short discussion and answer on that one, and the rest will be mostly on the first part. Let me just start with clarifying that with paralinguistic, I basically mean all these things like speech accompanying gesture, facial expression, posture, laughter, pauses, hesitations, etc. And importantly, I'm not really wanting to imply that these are not really linguistic things. I'm just using paralinguistic as a reasonably convenient term for covering all these phenomena, which traditionally have been excluded from more strict descriptive and theoretical linguistic work. More people coming. Okay, I take a very short break in order to let them come in, because it's kind of irritating when you have this. I could speak louder. What's happening? Do we know?
There were those suitcases, and they agreed that it's in here. But I mean, they're asking two people, so maybe you can have a look. Look at these. Oh, not that one.
Right. Okay. Yeah, paralinguistic, convenient term, not a theoretical stand. I'm actually not going to say that these things are not really linguistic, but rather I want an easy term to refer to these phenomena. Actually, today, the main focus will be on pauses and so-called repair routines, which include hesitations and false starts as starting events, and if time permits, a little bit of prosody. I'm fully aware of the fact that there has recently been a very much increased research activity on the topic area of fillers and placeholders. There was actually a workshop at the last ALT in Austin 2 years ago, where I understand there is a book coming out very soon on typological aspects of fillers and placeholders. I don't have very much to say about these apart from the 2 or 3 points I specifically making for the data I have. So, coming back to this practical question of what do you mark in your transcripts, most of you will probably be familiar, even if you are not able to read them, familiar with the kind of transcripts that people in conversation analysis do with capitals and all this kind of bracketing and underlining, and also things like in the second line, it is in special kind of attempts to capture how spoken language really sounds, and they have spent a lot of time and effort into capturing various aspects of speaking which not normally are included in linguistic transcripts. Of the more narrow kind, or the kind of transcripts I'm talking here about, what I call discourse transcripts last time. But these types of transcripts are, as is also well known, are enormously time consuming. I mean, you can spend, I think, a couple 10 hours and longer on 1 minute before you have really captured the kind of details they are geared at. So by way of contrast, the kind of transcripts in my corpora look like this. My corpora, the kind of annotations which regard these so-called paralinguistic kinds of phenomena are fairly minimal. That is basically what we use is an attempt to capture missing segments, like having these two axes, saying that there are probably something like 2 or 3 syllables missing there. And occasionally also indication of laughter, etc. That makes it easier. If you include that in your transcript, it makes you aware of the fact that you don't have to try to get a full syntactic construction here because there's something missing. So that you don't, and of course you can always go back to the audio and find that out, but it's kind of convenient, I find, if that's already in the transcript. But one can really, it's very open from my point of view, what you actually can and want to include in your transcript. It may be the case, depending on how Dorico is going to develop, that Dorico is using this also not all too elaborate kind of set of annotations, mentioning or including those things which are possibly more important for people working on little known languages than conversation analysis with their enormously broad kind of annotate or detailed kind of annotations they are using. So the short answer to the practical question for today is you add some things which you find practical to add, but rather not spend too much time on trying to do very detailed kind of annotations, especially if you don't have a research program which actually targets it. A much more important point, and here I come back to the end of last session, much more important point from my point of view is the question of how you decide on representing the typical word segmentation issues. Yeah, we discussed word segmentation last time, and I emphasized the fact that very often word segmentation is, for many types of verbs, not really a problem, but there are problematic areas, and one of the best known areas is that what is being called eclectic, and compounds are the other big area where writing, the question of how to write these things in transcripts is a major issue. I think, especially if you want to work with speakers on your transcripts, it's important to kind of agree with your speakers on what they think it should look like. It can be an important input for that question. To the best of my knowledge, but maybe someone of you has a good idea, there is no linguistic scientific reason for writing clitics or compounds separately or joined. There are reasons to do it either way. And so far I would say it's a personal preference, whether you do it this way or that way, or the community has different ideas about that. But what I want to draw your attention to, I think it has some kind of subconscious kind of influence on the analysis. So I've worked on Philippine languages, and in some ways it makes a big difference if you how you write the clitics there. Here you have Ilocano and Tagalog, and Tagalog has a standard orthography, and in a standard orthography all the clitics are written separately, as you can see in the second example, mahal ka ba nya. Yeah, mahal is an orthographic word, ka, ba, and nya, but ka, ba, and nya are clitics. Yeah, and they form a clitic chain also in speaking. And you basically have the same sentence from Ilocano above, ayayatenaka, where you have the clitics, the N is a suffix, but the na and the ka are clitics, and they are written together. And you can see in this example, and if you were to look at a page of text, it makes a real difference whether you write your clitics as part of the word or not. Yeah. So I'm happy to discuss this with you or get your ideas or input of if anyone has a good idea of whether there is really some strong evidence or some strong reason to go in either direction. I would love to hear about it. as a final point here in this regard, you sometimes find things like this here from a chapter on the Papuan language Iha, which I played already a few examples for, where the author of the chapter kind of presents you mammoth words like the one in the second line, yeah, which are enormously long and have glosses. Yeah, it's about 12 or 13 or 15 morphemes. And what is a bit annoying, I would say, or a bit strange, is there's not a single word in this chapter which gives a reason why you would assume that this is a word. And obviously, I think you cannot do that properly. You cannot just write things together and kind of make strong claims on what is a word. And it is pretty clear to me that towards the end, there's MB and the IH, and that's basically the personal ending in Iha words. And I've never seen any word which extends beyond this person marker at the end of a word. So it's a strange thing, but you can see in this example that one can kind of try to achieve certain effects by writing things together. So coming to the more theoretical point of today's lecture, prosodic and paralinguistic phenomena are relevant for translation, understanding what is being said. I think that should be obvious, and I will not have to say anything about that. Yeah, but I mean, anyone who has worked on recordings probably will have had the experience that sometimes it's important to know that people were laughing, and then you can understand what's going on. And if you don't know that, then you don't understand what's going on. But these phenomena are also very important for research on speech planning and processing, which in turn may feed into explanations of grammatical structure and typological trends. And they may also be relevant for grammatical analysis in two senses. On the one hand, they may provide evidence for descriptive analysis, but on the other hand, they may also actually require their own descriptive analysis. That will be a point later on. So I start here with a few remarks on pauses and function words in speech planning and processing in order to kind of situate what I have to say in the basic literature, where I think it is not unimportant to take note of the fact that the most of the literature on phenomena like pauses, hesitations, etc., comes from psychology, and actually much of that originates with the pioneering work of Frida Goldman-Eisler, who in the 50s started to look at interviews in psychiatric wards and had actually the task to find out of whether one could do these interviews in a more structured way. And I think for the main topic of her research, there was no positive outcome, but in the train of investigating how interviews with patients are being conducted, she noticed the fact that pauses can tell you something. That pauses, and she basically developed the hypothesis, which has been foundational for a certain type of psycholinguistics, that pauses reflect mental activity. When you have pauses, something is happening. And so pause lengths can tell you something about the fact whether there's something more complex happening or something more simple. Now that's the basic idea, which has been further developed in especially Anglo-Saxon psycholinguistics, where the focus has been on the one hand on pauses, but on the other hand, especially also on function words. And the basic observation there was that you get hesitations, pauses very often after a function word. And function words are also frequently repeated. So you get things like
the camera takes a close-up. The camera takes a close-up.
So there is a function word repetition, and you have lengthening there, and so forth. And actually Howell II and others have carried out a number of experiments where it was the speakers in these experiments were punished when they stopped speaking. Yeah, so it was prohibited to pause. Yeah, and so speakers were forced to speak for minutes on, and instead of pausing, they usually started using function word repetitions, the, and then the next flow, and then another, or and, etc. Yeah. What is interesting there, so this is the example in context a little bit more.
You see his hand, the camera takes a close-up.
Yeah. What does not happen in this context, what never happens is that they say the camera or something like that. Yeah, the repetition only happens on the function word. It also doesn't happen on the full lexical item. Yeah, it doesn't happen as the camera takes a close thing. It happens always on the and similar items. Yeah, and that basically was the insight for much, or for central part of the language production model of Labex, which is still the current best model as far as I know, namely the idea that when you produce language, when you speak, you basically have a concept, you have an idea of what you want to say in this component, up in the highest component, which is called the conceptualizer. And then you basically already have a plan for the grammatical structure of the sentence. And this plan for the grammatical structure of the sentence already includes choices of function words and case forms, etc. And you already start producing the sentence with its grammatical structure as soon as you have retrieved the first lexical item for this construction. Yeah? So you have a structural template and you fill in the lexical slot there one by one, but the template is already there. And that kind of explains why the function words are always there to produce. Whenever you hit a problem in speaking, the function word is already there and you can use it to keep the flow or whatever. Yeah, so that was, I think, a very important insight in psycholinguistics, and there are interesting further aspects of this phenomenon in cross-linguistic perspective, where there is a very clear and interesting difference between what I call pre-post function words and post-post ones. Yeah, some of you have probably seen or heard about my paper about the asymmetries in the prosodic phrasing of function words that basically deals with this topic. I want to only get into one issue which is not very prominent in that paper and not fully actually developed, because there's also more data to collect. But the important point is, if you look at languages like Tagalog, where you can make a direct comparison, you basically have in these languages pre-post function words like articles and prepositions and similar items, which are proclitic. So the famous ang, the si, nang, sa, these are proclitic elements. And you have enclitic elements, which come often after the first constituent, often after the verb. Yeah, and if you listen to Tagalog discourse, what you get, as you would expect from what I just said before about pre-post function words, you get hesitations and lengthenings, etc., on the same kinds of components as the English the. Yeah, so listen. Yeah, just listen to these examples. I think it's very clear in its way. Yeah, Dinella kami dyan, also Dinella, we were carried there, over there, sa ano. So he's looking for the word where they were carried, right? And then he says sa, this is the locative preposition. And then he says dito sa, there, over there, where they have, yeah, dito sa me, And then Jansa me malapit Jansa tulai, there over there, close to the bridge. Yeah, so you have this prepositional phrase with a demonstrative, a sa, and lengthening 4 times actually in a row, because the person is still looking for the expression bridge here. Yeah, this is very typical for Tagalog, that you can basically do with all these proclitic elements, all these case marking things, you can do your hesitations. What never happens is that the same thing is used for enclitics. Yeah, so you have a kind of completive marker, which is na, which is very widespread in Austronesian languages. And if you have a sentence like nung makatulog na, when already asleep, yeah, asleep already, the na is the already, and nakatulog is the form for sleeping. Itung kanyang hinihingu Tuhan, which means that person she was delousing. Yeah, so when the person she was delousing had already fallen asleep. The important thing here for us is the na at the end of the first line.
Nung makatulog na, itong kanyang hinihingu Tuhan.
So the na, as you may heard here, there's a strong fall on it, but it's very short. There's no length, no extra great lengthening. You would expect a certain type of lengthening at the end of an intonation unit. That's standard at the end of an intonation unit, but that's different from these hesitation lengthenings, because they actually, in this case, for example, they fall, as intonation units in Tagalog usually do. So what you don't find is nung makatulog na. That doesn't happen in my corpus. Yeah, and it would be interesting to look at the other corpora, especially Toli Maria. We should have a look out, or actually looked through it yesterday briefly, but that would be interesting to see that the enclitics behave very differently. And there's also, and here another example, pa is the complement of na. Na is already, pa is still basically also an enclitic. And here you have a sentence, ma papaigi pa ang buhay ninyo. Ma papaigi heißt will be improved, will be still more, yeah, the pa more improved, ang buhay ninyo, your life. Your life will be improved much more. Sounds like
Papaigi pa ang buhay ninyo. Mapapaigi pa ang buhay ninyo.
Yeah, mapapaigi pa ang buhay ninyo. Here again, if the person would be looking for the word buhay, yeah, as they were looking for the word for bridge before, they would never do this with pa, 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 pa. Yeah, they would do it with the ang. Yeah, they would say pa ang, and the ang could be repeated, etc. Yeah, so it never happens. Neither hesitation nor repetition happen with enclitics. So we have a fairly systematic difference between proclitic pre-post function words and post-post function words with regard to these phenomena. And the interesting thing would be really now to see whether that's universal or not, or whether that's some special idea of Austronesian languages or West Austronesian languages. I'm pretty certain that other Philippine languages work like Tagalog in this regard. One issue which one could also consider in this topic area is the question which actually started me to be interested in this topic, namely the question of, okay, if you have this function word repetition and if you have these hesitations after pre-post function words, can you use that to distinguish prefixes from proclitics? Yeah, would be nice. Yeah, prefixes shouldn't be separable. They shouldn't be hesitating items, etc. But they aren't. You can do the same things with what we as, or what Tagalog grammar people call prefixes, and what Tagalog people call grammar people call proclitics. Yeah. So here there's an example with naka, which is the stative actor voice realis prefix, nakabayukat. Nakabayukat means to be in a coiled position. And naka is the prefix here. And you can... You have the wonderful lengthening on the R of the naka. And there's another prefix, mag. I have it in my ear that people can say mag before they then come with the full the lexical base, etc. Yeah, so unfortunately, the hesitation phenomena are not giving you a nice way to distinguish prefixes from proclitics. But they kind of are distributed across and probably for reasons of speech production across pre-post and post-post function words. Something to check across languages. Okay, coming to my next topics, which is about the need to do grammatical analysis of fillers, placeholders, and similar items, or these which I have been mentioning. This again has been already proposed a longer time ago by psychologists, so people basically being in psychology, like Herb Clark, who has written a very nice and instructive paper together with Tom Warsaw, on the use of in English, and similar kinds of items. And their basic observation is that the initial idea, when people look at hesitations, etc., the initial idea is typically to say this is chaos. Yeah? Speech is interrupted and then it restarts. And the way how it is interrupted, the way how you hesitate is something which is forced on you by your physiology or something you basically don't have a control. And that's actually something that happens in speech in a certain way when you truncate. Yeah, these are totally abrupt kind of stops which are possible. And you, as far as I can tell, there is no rule for truncation. In any of the languages I know, you can stop after the onset of your first sound, you can stop, you can go through 90% of an item and stop there, etc. Yeah, so there is no real kind of way of clearly stopping, clearly saying that there's some kind of structural delimitation of how truncations happen. That's different to hesitations and filler items like English and And the two examples they are giving, among a few others in their paper, the first one is from the example 15 here, but it might also lead to all sorts of bogus representations. So the way I read it here now was having the preposition to pronounced with a schwa and also the with a schwa. But they say in the actual recording they are working on, it sounds more something like to wo. Yeah, so the claim is the speakers have an idea, or the speakers know that they are running into a problem, namely phrasing bogus representation, retrieving the lexical items for bogus representation. And once they know that they are running into a problem, they are restructuring the erms and the prepositions, and they give them more the gestalt of a phonological word of English. So towu in the analysis of Clark and Warsaw is an English word, which is bimoraic and has full vowels, etc. While the normal articulation of the hesitation particles is with a schwa. And actually they, as you can see in 15 bar, they have this extends to the following words, to all sorts of, they analyze as tal, tol, sort, sof. Yeah, they claim that this is the syllable structure of two all sorts of in that kind of delivery. In example 16, you have the same phenomenon for the indefinite article Yeah, all of you will know that can be articulated as a, and if it's articulated like a, it can be combined with the following syllable, and you get something like a potential. Yeah, but the important point is producing hesitation items, fillers, involves sometimes the same kind of planning steps as delivering a lexical item. Yeah, and it's not just a minimal articulation, schwa, something. So I'm presenting here a similar example, which also goes in the direction to indicate that although hesitation items, filler items, have certain aspects of indexes, they also have aspects of symbolic signs and have to be analyzed accordingly. Here I'm kindly allowed to use slides which Maria Badaji has produced for Totoli, where we find two different types of filled pauses. The A-like filled pause, which sounds like this. Yeah, I play it again. No.
Pertama itu punasa lengket no puling mo.
Yeah, so the R is very clear. Yeah, there's a long pause in the middle of the pause. There's this R. And there's another more A-like kind of filled pause.
Tahu so ya. Pagawan.
Yeah, there's A. It seems to be similar, and of course one could say this is totally arbitrary, and there is nothing really related to this.
Pagawan.
So, but Konstantin Kalland and Maria did further investigation of these two types of filled pauses, investigated distinguishing on the one hand the two vowels R and A-like, and on the other hand 3 different types of positions where these elements could occur. The 2 examples you heard just now were examples for between intonation unit boundaries. In both cases, very clear. You have an intonation unit, you have a pause, you have the R or the A, then you have a pause again, and then you have the next intonation unit. You can also have the R or the A at the beginning of an intonation unit. So you have an intonation unit, a pause, and then you have blah, 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 blah. So you have the R as a kind of onset for an intonation unit. And it could occur within an intonation unit, R or A. And if you do this coding and look at the distribution of the items across these settings or parameters, it is very clear that the R type of filled pause occurs most frequently either in the between condition or in the onset condition, while the A type of pause occurs more towards within an intonation unit. Yeah, so the context, the 2 vowel qualities are distributed across the contexts in different ways, and this is especially clear, I think, for the A filled pause, and there are a number of conclusions they are drawing there. But what is important for the argument here, we basically can describe these pause fillers very similar as with a distribution analysis as we describe segments and morphemes, etc. So in a certain way, they have morpheme-like type of properties, although not in, they are statistical tendencies, they are not categorically sharp differences, but there are clear associations of the one type with the one context and the other type with the other context. The idea is that the A-type of filler typically has a more hesitation type of function, or occurs when hesitations occur, while the R is a kind of discourse boundary marker between larger discourse segments, and it occurs typically there. So we could start later on discussing the topic of our workshop tomorrow. Yeah, it's episode boundaries or discourse, larger segment discourse segments. This R-marked boundary in the tautology would be one example. For that, to conclude this point, I simply play you the example with the example for A-like pause as in hesitation in a context where that is very clear.
Gitu siya na ano mo. Sisili is ngangaling babo ko mo kita itagwal pukatia.
Yeah, so there was this A in the middle in a kind of hesitation context, and that makes it very so this is a very good example for the fact that the A-like filled pause has something to do with hesitation, while the R-like pause is probably something relating to discourse structure. Yeah, in this sense, even filler items need some kind of grammatical description. Both the cases I had from Clark and Warsaw, where you basically have to account for the fact that the phonological and phonetic implementation of filler items in English can be different according to context. And here, the idea that the distribution of different filler items in Tagalog pauses, in tautology pauses, is not arbitrary, but shows tendencies for being functionally motivated and also being positionally different. Coming to my next point, which is actually the point which is of central interest to me currently in my research, but where I don't have too much to say, namely the question of whether we can get good evidence from pausing and or repair for grammatical analysis. Yeah, whether we need to include these phenomena in order to improve on our descriptive analysis. Yeah, that's the basic question here. And I have already kind of broached these topics in the preceding sections. So in terms of hesitation and repetition, I made this point already that pre-post function words do certain things which content words don't do. So you would have, in that regard, another criterion for distinguishing content words from function words, which could be of interest in certain languages. So yeah, if you are discussing the question whether a certain serial verb already has become a kind of more preposition-like element, one could think about the question of whether repetition, hesitation would be a kind of evidence which tells you this is already more a function word than a content word. I don't have the data. I haven't identified any relevant data in my corpora for such an issue, but one could think about it. Yeah, and I think it would be possibly a quite interesting difference, especially in the kind of settings where the grammaticization of an element is not becoming evident from its phonological structure. Yeah, so there's no phonological reduction happening. As we just had, major discourse boundaries may possibly be cued by pause lengths and pause fillers. So that would be another type of evidence from hesitations and pauses for this type discourse structure, not so much syntactic or morphosyntactic structure. And similarly, in a paper which I haven't reported on here yet, but which also includes something that Konstantin Kalland and Maria Badaci have been finding, is that the length of an following unit or the length of an anticipated delay can correlate with different kinds of fillers. Yeah, so the claim is a filler like in English previews a rather short delay, while kind of indicates there is going to be longer before I have resolved the current problem I'm experiencing in producing the next item. But there is no evidence, as I already said, for distinguishing prefixes and proclitics with these types of phenomena, which is a bit unfortunate. The main further example for evidence for morphosyntactic analysis is evidence from repair for constituent structure. That's an idea that has been proposed by Barbara Fox and collaborators already quite some time ago. And the basic idea here is to say that sometimes if you have a false start in this building, we got a room today. Basically you start a phrase with and then you break off, and then you correct this break off and say the full phrase is a room. Yeah, and this is basically self-repair. And if you have self-repair, the question is always, how far back do you go when you repair? Yeah, so in principle, one could say, why doesn't that person go back to the we, or even to the building before and restart the whole thing there? But why do they start with the article again? So the claim of Fox at her colleagues is that in English, actually, in fact, you have two major options. You can either start your repair at the beginning of the phrase where your interruption occurred. So within an NP, you go back to the beginning of the NP. Within a prepositional phrase, you go back to the preposition. Alternatively, you can also go back to the beginning of the clause where the interruption occurred. So in this case, plus once he got some, yeah, so some, there's the break off, and now you repair your segment, he got some battery acid on his trunk. Yeah, so here the repair goes back to the subject of the clause of where the sum occurred. Yeah, so the basic claim, and I have an example of my own here to make that perhaps even a bit more clearer, which we can also listen to.
This is taking place in California. I assume this is taking place in California.
Yeah, so this take place can restart with this is taking, and you go back to the beginning of the clause. You could also just go take, no, you have to go back to the take minimally. But what actually is not really happening is that people do something like is taking place in California. You rather have to go to the real beginning of the clause. Yeah, so if that is actually true for a language you work on, then you would have some kind of test for constituent boundaries, which sometimes can be tricky. Yeah, to say where actually is the boundary of a constituent. They basically, in this paper I'm referring to here, they are basically discussing Japanese also as a second language, and basically claim in Japanese, as opposed to English, you only have the phrasal repair starting targets. So you never go back to the beginning of the clause, you always go back to the beginning of the NP or the PP, but not further. Yeah, so it's more local. To the best of my knowledge, no one has really followed up very much on these ideas. and I'm not sure whether they are not really viable or whether it just happens no one has done it. So that's one thing I want to find out of over the next couple of months to see whether there is more to that or not. Okay, I come to my final point today, which goes back to prosody. And doesn't really 100% fit into the topic I've been discussing so far, but it's continues something which I started in the first lecture and is also relevant in the question of what is good evidence from not so typical types of evidence for the kind of analysis we are doing. Yeah, what is good evidence for morphosyntactic analysis? Here I am a bit provocative, possibly, in claiming that if it is true, as some people, including myself, believe that prosody and syntax are essentially independent of each other, there are different ways of chunking the stream of language you are producing, then prosody cannot actually provide evidence for syntax. Or as I would say, it can provide only very limited kinds of evidence. Yeah, and what I'm kind of proposing, also in a paper I quoted in the first lecture, named Himmelmann 22, is that one has to distinguish between prosodically robust syntax and prosody-dependent syntax. What do I mean with prosodically robust syntax? This is a standard example. Several or many of you will have heard from me. This is a German sentence und dann habe ich plötzlich von weitem gesehen, dass ein Teil von der Strecke mit Schnee bedeckt war. Yeah, I've read only the non-fragmentary parts of it. We can go through it, yeah, and then I have seen from afar, or then have I suddenly from afar seen that a part of the road with snow, with snow-covered was. Yeah, it reads already a bit fragmentary. When you listen to it, you will see what I mean with a prosodically fragmented kind of speech.
Dann habe ich plötzlich von weitem gesehen, dass ein Teil von der Strecke mit Schnee, also mit Schnee bedeckt war.
Yeah, the important point here is this is a perfectly grammatical, rather complex German sentence with a matrix clause and an embedded clause, with a complementizer that, with verb final position because it's an embedded clause, with case marking correct, etc. Yeah, it's apart from the and erms, it's 100% perfect written German. Yeah, but it's obviously delivered in a not very coherent prosodic way. And the important point is, you can totally abstract from the prosody, and you can see what the syntax is. Yeah, and the syntax does not get distorted by the prosody. The prosody can be totally fragmentary, but the syntax is still there. That's the basic point. Yeah, and this is not. I have, of course, then for other languages the same type of evidence. Let me very briefly show this Tagalog one. One isang manlalakbay, one traveler sa lugar ng Laguna. Sa is the preposition we already had a number of times. Lugar is the place, nang is genitive. Laguna is a place name. And in the delivery of this example,
Isang manlalakbay sa lugar ng Laguna.
Yeah, you get the preposition split off the noun which follows, and then the nang, which introduces another noun phrase, gets split off from the noun that follows. And that there is a long hesitation, pausing, etc. doesn't matter, change the fact that we are talking about a prepositional phrase and a genitive phrase. Yeah, and the prosody doesn't actually change that. And if we were to go into more details, I would actually argue that the sa belongs to a different types of intonation units than the complement noun, yeah, so you basically can split a prepositional phrase across two intonation units. Now, coming back to the issue of can we use prosodic evidence for syntactic constructions, the basic observation which got me started on this topic was that people invoke prosody as syntactic evidence in a very limited number of cases. Yeah, it's when people discuss prepositional phrases, when they complementizer clauses, case marking or whatever, no one talks about prosody. You don't need prosody for standard syntax. You talk about prosody once you talk about topics, afterthoughts, serial verbs. Then suddenly prosody comes in as important evidence. I'm running through my argument here on the basis of the serial verb construction argumentation. Serial verbs typically occur within a single intonation unit, and if you look at the literature on serial verbs, it's one of the standard criteria for a serial verb construction to say this can occur, or this occurs in an intonation unit. As this example from Voy, where the important, it's a relative clause, the tree where the man had climbed and was picking fruits. I is the tree, and then relative clause and chota kio, that's the serial construction. Chota ota is climb, and ko is take with third singular subject indexes. Chota kio would be the serial construction. Two verbs, two inflected verbs following each other within one intonation unit is the basic claim. But when you look at these kind of combinations that occur as so-called serial verbs, you sometimes find them in one intonation unit, and then you call them serial verbs, as in 8. There you have again the ko for take, and you have apai for run, and the two together mean he ran away with them. But if you split them across two intonation units, you get a totally different meaning. And of course, you don't call it a serial verb anymore. So you have the ko at the end of the first intonation unit, and you have the run as part of the second intonation unit. And then you basically have very clearly two separate events following each other. But the important point is, the only way you know this is by prosody. That's what I call a prosody-dependent construction. There is no syntactic marking of a serial verb construction. The so-called serial verb construction only consists by way of the prosody. So you have what I call a prosody-dependent construction. And basically, the argument goes then on, if you say that the two items that come together in one intonation unit are a serial verb construction, then you run into the problem in Voy and also in other languages that you have examples like this one here called 13, Kiro bia ma chon chura, where you basically have four verbs, take, go down, put, and placed upright. But these four verbs, they come in pairs linked with some kind of and sequential. We call it sequential marker. So if the first examples I played are serial verbs, then intonationally this is also clearly one intonation unit. Therefore, you would have to claim this also a serial verb construction, although people kind of get uneasy when you say you have sequential markers within the serial verb construction. That shouldn't happen. And here and then you have meinte, which is and then a real kind of heavy kind of conjunction also within the single intonation unit. Yes, one unit, again 4 or 5 verbs, and this and then there. And the further argument then goes, I only play one example. You can have, once you allow constructions with several verbs and a conjunction to be serial verb constructions, then German has serial verb constructions en masse as well, right? Yeah, this is one intonation unit, but you have 2 verbs and you have an and there.
Gibt und die sind überall verstreut.
Again, 2 verbs, yeah, with und, or also this what's also very typical as a serial verb construction is this repeated item and the go and go and go, yeah. It's a single intonation unit, and you get a repetition of these verbs. So, the basic argument is many so-called serial verb constructions are not really not morphosyntactic constructions in the same sense as noun phrases and prepositional phrases. Yeah, that's my point. They are basically prosody-dependent constructions. And then, of course, we could say, of course, in a certain way, the only evidence for the construction is prosodic. But my point is, it shows a different type of constructions. It's not prosodic evidence for a morphosyntactic construction. Yeah, that was my point. In a certain way, a proper syntactic construction needs to survive what I would call the prosodic breaking test. Yeah, that's what I had with the German example at the beginning. Yeah, with this longish kind of complement clause, which was still passable and visible and clear as a complement construction, despite the fact that it was prosodically broken up. So, prosodic evidence for syntax proper, for morphosyntactic constructions in a proper sense, is, to my mind, very limited and circumstantial. On the one hand, we could say we have something like this prosodic breaking test, and on the other hand, we could say it is often, if you want to say that something is a morphosyntactic construction, it is probably not wrong to expect that it fits into one intonation unit, but the fact that something can occur in a single intonation unit is not evidence for morphosyntactic construction. Yeah, so that is basically my point here. And I come to my conclusions for today. Taking spoken language seriously means to take prosody and so-called paralinguistic phenomena seriously, as already done in psycholinguistics for a long time. Some of these paralinguistic phenomena have characteristics of symbolic signs and have to be analyzed accordingly. Pauses and repair strategies have an important role to play in organizing discourse. Repair strategies can be sensitive to grammatical structure and thus may also serve as evidence for it. And finally, preposed function words interact with pauses of all types in intricate ways, which also impact their grammar. Those were the main points of today's presentation. Thank you very much for coming and listening.